Good morning, everybody. Mr. Bauman here. It is Monday morning. Sorry if you hear background noises. That's the weirdos working on my street. They are tearing up my street this week. Very exciting stuff outside. Can't wait to see what they do to that this week. I got a park like 2 blocks away. I'm very excited. But we're more excited because we get to talk about the Korean War today. Korean War was one of those things in American history that, well, it started to change the way we operate as a country. We were used to winning wars, and well, as you're going to find out today, we didn't exactly win this one. Didn't exactly lose, but we certainly didn't win. The background of the war was after World War II, Korea was divided in half. Korea had been controlled by the Japanese during World War II, and when the war ended, the Soviet Union was deciding how to control things and what to do, and they decided they wanted to control part of Korea. The United States didn't like that idea because the Soviet Union was communist. They were very concerned about what they would do. Remember, we were concerned about communism spreading. We talked about that last week. So, in this case, the North was communist, controlled by the USSR, and the South was not communist. As you see as the sign here, they were divided at what's called the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel is 38 degrees north latitude. It's the dividing line between north and south. The picture you see here, unfortunately, in the map, that's today's dividing line. When I click here, this was the dividing line, the dotted line, back in 1945 until 1950. This war starts when the North Koreans attacked the South Koreans. They made it all the way. If you look at the map here, you can see the line here next to the left of Seoul. That's how you pronounce this name right here, Seoul, South Korea. They attacked. Oops, oh, fat fingers. Hold on. There we go. Um, the North came in with the dashed line here along the western coast of Korea, and they attacked. They went all the way past Seoul. They already had taken over Seoul, and they kept going all the way down into this bottom corner, really, of South Korea. So within less than 3 months, they had pushed the South Koreans almost out of their own country. And South Korea was very close to having to give up. Kind of an ugly situation. They had pushed through until on September 15th, the United Nations stepped in. Remember, the United Nations had just been created after World War II, and they are coming in. They're going to send in troops. The United Nations votes to stop this aggression against the will of the Soviet Union. The Soviets thought that was terrible. They thought this was a civil war. It should be left alone. Even though the country had been split into two countries, the United Nations stepped in, and President Harry Truman was chosen as the United States president to be in charge. And as Truman was chosen to be in charge of the war, he chose General Douglas MacArthur, who had been the guy in charge of island hopping during World War II. MacArthur was a very good general, very popular, very famous because he had led the island hopping campaign that had led to victory against Japan for the United States. He was put in charge of the Allied forces. Now, the thought was, oh boy, the South Koreans are pushed to this corner. They better land here at Pusan. That's the name of the city down here. Uh, Giggle all you want. They would land at Pusan and make their way up into the north. Well, MacArthur said, no way. If we do that, they know we're coming. They're to easily be able to contain our attack and hold us back. So instead, they go all the way around to this western coast and they land at a place called Incheon. Incheon was where they attacked, and this surprise attack in September got us onto the beach here on the western coast, and then was able to push back against South Korea and slowly push them out of North Korea. Pretty incredible. So you can see the line going up. They pushed out in September. So within about 2 weeks, the North was pushed out of the South. And actually, as you can see, the Allies pushed all the way to the capital of Pyongyang by October of 1950. So within a month of landing there, just over a month and 4 days of landing there, they had pushed to the capital. They entered the capital. They actually took the capital and will push even further north. So the United Nations were very smart. They attacked behind the line. The result was the North Korean forces were pushed across the 30th parallel. But once we pushed, as you can see the purple lines here, Once we pushed them to this line way up in the north in November of 1950, so again, this is within 2 months of the war, I'm sorry, of the United Nations entering the war with the United States at the lead, China jumps in on the side of North Korea. So, reminder, the Cold War was the United States versus the Soviet Union, but never did our troops cross paths, never did our troops fight the Soviet troops. Instead, China sends in forces. And this is where decisions had to be made. When China entered the war, it basically becomes a stalemate because China did not have the greatest war machine necessarily in the world, but they have one thing that the rest of the world does not. They have the most people on Earth. Even at this point in history, 70 years ago, they had 1 billion people. And at this point in history, the United States only had around 200 million. So they still had around 5 times our population, as they do now. So they send in a bunch of troops. The Soviets also supply them with weapons. And at that point, the war becomes a major, major disaster because we're fighting back and forth, right along this line, this purple line here. It doesn't change a whole lot at that point right away when China joins, but they solidify and stop the attack and slowly are going to push back a little bit. Truman fears World War III. He doesn't want to get into a huge war. He doesn't want to go fight in China, that's for sure. But Douglas MacArthur disagreed. Douglas MacArthur said we should be bombing the crap out of China to make them back out of this war. MacArthur even suggested at one point that, well, we have these atomic bombs. Maybe we threaten China with atomic bombs if they're not going to stop doing this. Truman says, no, 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 no. We just got out of the biggest and most deadly war in history. 27 million people had to die in World War II. We don't need 27 million more people dying because we start a war again in Korea and there's a world war between us, China, the Soviets, and God knows whoever else would get involved. Now, MacArthur, being the lead general, thought he kind of should be in charge of everything and Truman should just back out because he was just the president. But the president is the commander in chief of the military. He is in charge. So, MacArthur's supposed to do what he's told. That's the rules in the military. You follow orders or people die. Well, he didn't follow orders. MacArthur started criticizing Truman and the war plan. He even called Truman soft on, questioned whether Truman was being soft on communism. He went to the newspapers. Reporters were getting these quotes from MacArthur. He was on the radio. Remember, there wasn't a lot of TV back then, but he was on the radio, and the quotes were out there saying that we should be bombing China. We could easily beat China in this war, and Truman's not happy about it. He basically tells MacArthur, "You got to stop, or you're not going to be in charge anymore." And MacArthur doesn't stop, so Truman fired MacArthur. And at that point, many Americans get really mad, and they blame Truman for being soft on communism. That's the thing. They thought we should be going to win this war, not just stop the communist advance. Well, Truman does not run for re-election. Remember, FDR had been elected 4 times, died at the very, very beginning of his 4th term. Truman took over the beginning of that 4th term. He had 3 years and 11 months, I believe, of 3 years and 11 months of that term plus one of his own terms, and he decided not to run for a 3rd term. And shortly after that, Congress would pass an amendment saying that you cannot have 3 terms as President of the United States. You can only have 2 terms. Well, the 1952 election was a landslide victory for Dwight D. Eisenhower. Very easy victory for him. He was the hero, the lead general in World War II in Europe. So he wins the election, and everyone thinks Eisenhower is going to bring lots more troops to Korea and go win this war. Well, everyone was wrong. Eisenhower fights to end the war, not by fighting, but by trying to come to an agreement with the North Koreans. Basically saying that we had done our job. Our job as United Nations force was to stop the aggression of North Korea. It was not to reunite Korea. It was not to make it one country. It was not to end communism. The job was supposed to be, the United Nations charge was to stop the advance of the North Koreans and give South Korea their country back. We did that. So Eisenhower said, this wasn't my war, I didn't start it, but I'm happy to finish it. The 3 things that are agreed to in the armistice to end the Korean War. Number one, they'll redraw the North and South Korea border near the 38th parallel. It won't be that straight line, it'll be that kind of curved line you saw. South Korea actually adds a tiny bit of land, but there's very little land changed. Um, there will also be a demilitarized zone. So no military forces within a certain number of miles along the border. So they don't have troops staring at each other. That is still in place today. There's a demilitarized zone between North and South, and Korea would remain divided, which it has still today for over now 75 years total. They've been a divided country. The Korean War is often called the Forgotten War, and that's not because people are old who were alive back then and have forgotten that it happened. It's not because people are stupid and can't remember stuff. It's because, number one, it's the first time the U.S. didn't win a war. We had won, obviously, a revolution. We kind of won our War of 1812 because the British gave up. We won wars against Mexico and Spain. The North, I guess the Union, won the Civil War. We won World War I and World War II and other smaller wars in between. But even more importantly, Korea is overshadowed by World War II and Korea. I'm sorry, World War II and Vietnam overshadowed Korea because of the scope and the length of those wars. This war lasted for us less than 3 years. Really, the fighting was about 2 years, and then there was the armistice was trying to figure out. But also, it was a lot smaller force that we sent. Now, obviously, we were at war in World War II for only 4 years, but we had almost 500,000 Americans die there. And our war in Vietnam, Americans will be involved in Vietnam for over 10 years. The actual fighting will be about 8 years for the United States. But the loss here and the lack of excitement for the Korean War is going to lead to a lack of support for Vietnam. Basically, the question is, why bother? This is across the world. The same question in Korea will be re-asked in gosh, I can't talk today. Sorry. The same question in Korea will be asked in Vietnam. Why do we fight these wars across the world that don't affect Americans here in the United States? Why are Americans dying so that other people can be free of communism? What do we care? This isn't our problem. We didn't start this war. Why is this an American issue? Memorials will be built. This wall you can see in the background is the wall at the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. We'll see a little more of that in a minute. I'm just going to show you some quick pictures of Korea, and I will finally shut up, I promise. These are some guys using some advanced weapons in World War II. It's the USS Missouri, firing on land. The battle at Incheon, when we landed our troops, they needed a little cover. Pushed into the fire. So on the far left, oh shoot, fat fingers again. On the far left is the Soviet general, who's supposed to be pushing. Well, this is confusing. Now I don't even know who this is. What's going on here? Well, basically, this is the North Korean soldier being pushed by a North Korean general, being pushed by the Chinese, being pushed by the Soviets. Basically, the North Korean forces were pushed into this fire. North Korea didn't really want to fight South Korea. They don't want to have a civil war. They don't want to kill one another. But the Soviet Union was kind of like that puppeteer, forcing North Korea to fight its own countrymen in South Korea to try to be all communism, trying to spread communism around the world. Korean civilians suffered greatly. Unfortunately, as the North Koreans were pushed out of the South, they started killing mass numbers of people in villages all around all around South Korea, and they left tons of bodies in their wake. This was the first war that soldiers were integrated, worked together, African American and white soldiers. It was not determined by the color of your skin, whose regiments you were in. Harry Truman integrated or desegregated the military back in 1948. It was a huge, huge change in military operations. Again, this is the first war where there were not black-only regiments. And this is an American F-86 shooting down the Soviet MiG-15. Of course, the Soviets were sending planes over for the North Koreans. You can see the explosion back here as the MiG-15 is being shot. It blows up. Again, civilians massacred by communist troops. You see the numbers of dead bodies. Focus on that if you want. I would hope you wouldn't want to. And this is Picasso's Massacre in Korea. Yes, very disturbing. Picasso is a strange, strange painter sometimes. But a lot of women and children were killed, and that's the focal point of this painting. Yeah, oof, a little creepy. Take that in. And the U.S. forces landing at Incheon. You see at the beachhead, they had to put ladders up to climb onto the beachhead for that surprise attack on North Korea. Over 36,000 Americans were killed. You can see the person here buried in rubble, or partially buried in rubble. It's hard to even see that there's a body there on the bottom of the screen. What we didn't know is it was going to be very cold in Korea. We weren't real smart about that. We had actually we got our troops outfitted for cold weather pretty quickly, but this could have been a major disaster. I don't think the troops realized how cold it was going to be. Even though the 38th parallel south of Minnesota, we'd be talking like around Missouri, probably, or maybe just south of there. Yeah, right around Missouri is where the 30th parallel. As you get north into Korea, you're getting close to where Minnesota is, so you can have some cold in the winter, probably like an Iowa type situation. And here you see the guys here bundled up in the cold, and that is the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. So on the right side of your picture here, you walk up the pathway, and you kind of see the soldiers. This is really cool at night. That's usually when our 8th graders go to Washington, D.C. is in the evening. We go to the Vietnam Memorial, and then this Korean War Memorial, and then the background is the Lincoln Memorial. We go visit that. But as you walk around it, on the left side of where the picture is, where these people are walking over here, there's that wall you saw earlier. And then as you look into it, you see like it looks like there's reflections in it, but the reflections are actually pictures of soldiers in Korea. So kind of a cool memorial to remind us of those who sacrificed themselves. This is a really sad war. If you watch the video that I've attached today, I know it's a little long, so don't feel like you have to watch it. But if you have time to watch it, it's pretty interesting because some people talk about how they were treated when they got back. They weren't treated horribly or anything, but they're kind of ignored. It was like people were more concerned about what was on TV than their friends who went off to fight in Korea. And the guys were shocked by that. When guys came back from World War II, they were cheered. There were parades. They were treated like royalty when they first came back from World War II. Guys came back from Korea and like, oh, you're back, cool. Oh my gosh, I missed you. Oh, hey, I had to watch TV. Like it was a very small celebration of life that people had come back, not the big celebration we had after World War II. And it's very different. Um, we didn't care as much. Part of the problem was we didn't win, but also this was what we didn't exactly understand what we were fighting for here as Americans. Um, also in there, you'll see famous folks. Famous baseball player Ted Williams, one of the greatest baseball players of all time, Hall of Famer for the Boston Red Sox. Some believe to be the greatest hitter of all time. Went and fought in Korea, kind of against his will. We'll talk about that in there. He was drafted because he was a pilot for the Air Force and fought in World War II and missed some time in baseball then. He'll miss more time in baseball to go fight in Korea. Also, Willie Nelson, famous singer. Willie Nelson was also in the Korean War, among others. But the video is kind of interesting if you want to check that out. There's also a link to talk about some other stories the guys wrote. Either one of those are great to go to if you go to the assignment today. But most importantly, there's 10 quick questions for you to answer about this. If you need the slideshow to answer the questions, it's also linked in there. So you can click on the slides yourself and check out the answers. But hopefully you learned a little something about the Korean War. Hopefully you're doing okay. And remember, Monday, this is for hours 1 through 4, and Tuesday, this is for hours 5 and 6. Have a great day, everybody.